Ever feel like your brain's bursting with questions, but sifting through research papers just isn't your style?
Yeah, I get it.
Well, today, we're going to take a shortcut into the fascinating world of rewards, the potent stuff that drives us, pushes us, or
Hmm.
sometimes totally backfires.
Right. You think you've got rewards figured out, then bam, new research comes along and flips the script.
Forget those simple carrot and stick metaphors. We've dug into studies from psychology labs to brain imaging scans, and trust me, the science of rewards is way more complex and way more interesting than you might think.
Oh, absolutely. The simplistic view just doesn't cut it anymore.
For centuries, it seemed like a no-brainer. Good behavior, give them a reward, end of story. But lately, there's been this rising tide of doubt, especially in psychology, about whether those shiny gold stars, bonuses, or even just a good job might actually be messing with our natural love for things that internal fire we call intrinsic motivation.
It's a huge debate, and we're going to tackle it head on in this deep dive.
We're going to unravel this whole historical puzzle, look at the evidence from all sides, and pull out the insights that can help you understand what really motivates you and those around you. We've got research from education, social psychology, and even neuroscience on the table.
Ready to get those brain cells buzzing.
I am. But first, I got to admit, even the word reward starts to get fuzzy when you realize psychologists and neuroscientists are kind of looking at it from different angles.
It's true. There's a subtle but really important difference in focus. Social and educational psychologists, they tend to see a reward as something very external, like a you do this, then you get that kind of deal. Think about getting a bonus at work, right?
Yeah, hit your targets, boss hands over the cash.
Exactly. It's coming from someone else, and it's tied to specific actions. So these psychologists are really focused on the control aspect, who's holding the reins of that reward system.
So they're thinking about fairness, long-term effects, whether that bonus is actually building good habits or just creating a bunch of little reward junkies.
That's it. Now, neuroscientists, they're also interested in the bonus, but they're peeking under the hood, looking at what happens inside the brain when that reward, or even just the anticipation of it, kicks in. They're tracking the brain activity, the dopamine surges, and how all that shapes our future behavior through positive reinforcement.
So it's like the psychologist is studying the game, the rules, and the players, while the neuroscientist is mapping out the playing field itself, the brain's terrain.
That's a great analogy.
And this difference in perspective has really fueled this decades-long debate in psychology about whether rewards are a net positive or a potential pitfall, especially when it comes to that delicate flower of intrinsic motivation.
Which brings us to the heart of the matter, right? Intrinsic motivation, that magical drive to do things simply because they bring you joy, they feel inherently satisfying. You're not doing it for the accolades or the paycheck, but for the pure love of the activity itself.
Like that friend who spends hours in the kitchen experimenting with new recipes, not to impress guests or win a cooking show, but just for the sheer pleasure of creating something delicious.
Perfect example. Now, the concern, and this is where researchers like Deci and Ryan have been sounding the alarm, is that if we start throwing external rewards into the mix, those cookies the psychologist was talking about, we might accidentally snuff out that internal spark.
It's like instead of the cook being driven by their passion for flavors and textures, they start obsessing over winning prizes, getting recognition, and maybe even lose some of that creative zest they had before.
That's the worry. Their self-determination theory dives deep into this, suggesting that when rewards feel controlling, when they take away our sense of autonomy or make us feel less competent, they can really mess with our intrinsic drive. They've got studies showing how rewards can sometimes lead to less deep learning, less self-regulation, and even a dip in creativity.
So it's that classic fear that turning your hobby into a hustle, your passion into a paycheck, might actually suck the joy out of it.
Right. But then enter stage right, a whole other camp of researchers with a strong counter-argument.
I knew there had to be another side to this.
Oh, yeah. Researchers like Cameron, Pierce, and Eisenberger, they've been pushing back, saying, hold on, folks, the reward bashing has gone too far. They argue that a lot of those studies showing the negative side of rewards had some flaws, maybe some misinterpretations.
So they're saying rewards aren't always the villains in the story. What's their take on when rewards actually work well?
They're highlighting the potential upside. They say rewards can actually boost motivation and performance, especially for tasks that aren't inherently thrilling on their own. And even for those more enjoyable activities, they found that when the reward is directly linked to how well someone does, what they call performance contingent rewards, they can have a positive effect.
It's like instead of feeling manipulated, you're getting recognized for your skill, for putting in the effort, which can actually be super encouraging.
Exactly. It's about feeling like you earned it, not like you were bribed into it.
Got it. But then, isn't there this whole other camp saying rewards can be tricky, not always good or bad?
Absolutely. That's where researchers like Lepper and Harakovich come in with a more nuanced view. They acknowledge that rewards can be complicated, they're not always beneficial, but they're not inherently evil
Yep.
either.
So it's not a black and white issue.
Nope. Lepper's work on the overjustification effect is a classic example. He found that if you reward someone for something they already love doing, they might start thinking, wait, am I only doing this for the reward now? And when that reward disappears, their motivation goes poof.
It's like that kid who loves to draw, then starts getting a sticker for every picture. Suddenly, they're drawing for the stickers, not the joy of creating, and when the stickers stop, the drawing might stop too.
Precisely. And then you have Harakovich, who's shown that the impact of rewards can really depend on the context. Sometimes they hurt motivation, sometimes they have no effect, and sometimes they actually make it stronger. It's a fascinating debate still unfolding in the psychology world.
It sounds like there are a lot of moving parts. So that's the psychology side of things, focusing on behavior and interpretations. But what about the brain itself? Do neuroscientists have the same kind of back and forth when it comes to rewards?
Interestingly, the neuroscience perspective has been much more consistent. Study after study keeps pointing to the fundamental role of rewards and the anticipation of rewards as major drivers of our actions, choices, and even how we learn.
So for neuroscientists, our brains are basically wired to seek out those rewarding hits.
Yeah, they see it as deeply ingrained in our survival mechanisms. Our brains are constantly evaluating the potential reward value of everything around us and connecting that to our actions.
Like a built-in reward radar, constantly scanning for anything that might give us a boost.
Exactly. And while they acknowledge that sometimes this system can go haywire, leading us down some not so great paths, the general consensus is that rewards, more often than not, have positive effects on our behavior.
So where exactly in this amazing 3-pound universe inside our skulls does all this reward processing happen? Time for a quick brain tour.
Think of the reward circuitry as this interconnected web of brain regions, some in the higher level thinking parts and some in the more primitive emotional areas. Key players include the striatum, which is like a central hub for decision making, the prefrontal cortex, our brain's executive control center, and the orbitofrontal cortex, which helps us weigh different options.
And these areas are constantly buzzing, talking to each other, figuring out what's rewarding, and guiding our actions based on those evaluations.
You got it. Now, let's not forget the rock star of the reward system, the chemical messenger that makes it all go dopamine.
Dopamine, the brain's feel-good juice.
Exactly. When something rewarding happens, or when we just anticipate something good, dopamine gets released in specific brain pathways, like the mesocortical limbic pathway. This pathway connects a bunch of key areas, like the ventral tegmental area, and the nucleus accumbens a major pleasure center, and the prefrontal cortex. It's essentially the highway that carries those reward signals throughout the brain.
Okay, dopamine is the fuel, the reward circuitry is the engine. But how did scientists even figure all this out?
You know, it's a classic science story, a bit of serendipity mixed with a lot of ingenuity. Back in the 1950s, two researchers, Olds and Milner, were studying arousal in rats, but they accidentally misplaced an electrode ending up near the nucleus accumbens. And guess what?
The rat had a sudden craving for electrodes.
Not quite, but close. The rat went bonkers whenever that area was stimulated, and it kept coming back for more. So they rigged up a lever the rat could press to stimulate itself, and that little guy worked tirelessly to keep hitting that lever.
Talk about a happy accident that opened up a whole new understanding of how we work.
Right. It showed that certain areas in the brain are inherently rewarding. Later research zoomed in on key areas like the nucleus accumbens and found that animals would even work to get doses of dopamine-like chemicals delivered to those areas.
It's like finding the brain's pleasure button.
Yeah, and it gave us this concept of expected value, the way our brains seem to calculate the likelihood and size of a potential reward, which influences our learning big time. It's like we're constantly running cost-benefit analyses in our heads.
Like, is that cookie worth the calories? Is that extra work effort worth the potential bonus?
Exactly. Then brain imaging came along, PET scans, fMRI, letting us see these reward responses in real time in the human brain. Studies show that the ventral striatum, for example, lights up when we're anticipating a reward, and the bigger the anticipated reward, the more activity we see. And, get this, unexpected rewards also trigger a strong response in this area.
Okay, so that brings up a really intriguing question. What happens when our reward predictions go wrong? Like when we're expecting a huge payoff but end up with a measly consolation prize.
That's where the reward prediction error theory comes in. Our brains are constantly making predictions, especially when it comes to rewards. And learning happens when there's a mismatch, a surprise, between what we predicted and what actually happens.
It's like expecting a birthday cake and getting a single cupcake. Our brains are going to be a little less excited than they were a minute ago.
That's it. And that dip in excitement, that error signal, actually helps us adjust our predictions for the future. For example, if you're expecting a big reward and you get a small one, or nothing at all, the activity of dopamine neurons in your reward circuitry actually decreases.
So disappointment can actually be a brain-boosting experience.
In a way, yeah. It helps us learn, refine our expectations, and make better decisions in the future. Now, neuroscience has also gotten really good at breaking down the different components of a reward experience. It's not just one monolithic feeling.
Like we can want something really badly, but then not even enjoy it that much when we get it.
That's exactly what researchers like Burrage have found. They've identified at least three core psychological elements: liking, which is the pure pleasure we experience; wanting, which is the drive that pushes us to go after the reward; and learning, which is forming associations to help predict future rewards. And get this, these components seem to be processed in slightly different parts of the brain, involving different neural pathways.
So you could have a ton of wanting without much liking, or vice versa.
Exactly. You can crave that chocolate cake like crazy, but then feel kind of meh after eating it. Or you might stumble upon a delicious new food you never even knew you wanted. It highlights the complexity of rewards and how they play out in our brains.
Fascinating stuff. And it's not just about the immediate sensation, right? Neuroscience has shown that rewards and the anticipation of them affect all sorts of mental processes. They grab our attention, even for things we didn't think were important before. They can boost our thinking skills, probably thanks to that dopamine hit. They make memories stickier, so we're more likely to remember things associated with rewards. And they energize us, making us react faster, perform better.
It's like our brains have this built-in reward spotlight shining on anything that might lead to something good.
Love that analogy.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the pleasure itself, right? There's this concept of reward saliency, how meaningful a reward feels to us.
Absolutely. Neuroscience is showing that rewards we actively work for, that we earn through effort, tend to light up the reward circuitry way more than rewards we just passively receive. It's like the brain values the feeling of accomplishment, of agency, as much as the reward itself.
Makes sense. A surprise bonus you worked hard for probably feels way more rewarding than a regular paycheck you just expect to show up.
Exactly. And finally, let's not forget that the brain areas involved in processing social rewards, things like getting praise, feeling accepted, or having strong relationships, overlap quite a bit with the areas that process more tangible rewards like money or food. It suggests that our need for connection is deeply intertwined with our reward system.
So getting a thumbs up from a friend might light up similar brain circuits as finding a $20 bill on the sidewalk. That's pretty cool. All right, so we've got these two rich fields of study, psychology and neuroscience, each with their own lens on rewards. Where do these two worlds converge?
It's where things get really interesting. We're trying to connect those external behaviors and subjective experiences that psychologists study with the underlying neural activity that neuroscientists map out. Let's start with that classic distinction in psychology: extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation.
Doing it for the reward versus doing it for the love of the game.
Right. But neuroscience is starting to suggest that maybe the brain doesn't see this distinction as so black and white. Studies have shown that both doing something for the pure joy of it and doing something for an external reward, like money, can activate similar areas in the brain's reward network, particularly a region called the putamen.
So maybe the brain is less concerned with the source of our motivation and more with the fact that there's a potential reward on the horizon.
That's a possibility. While some research has hinted at subtle differences in other brain areas depending on the type of motivation, the actual choices we make often look pretty similar. So the distinction might be more about the flavor of the reward or our overall motivational mindset rather than completely separate brain mechanisms.
Makes you rethink those classic categories. Now, what about those concerns in psychology about rewards potentially crushing our intrinsic drive? What does neuroscience say about that?
Neuroscience brings some really interesting insights here, especially the idea of incentive relativity. Our brains seem to adjust to a certain level of reward, and if those rewards suddenly disappear, it can throw us off balance, potentially even triggering a stress response. Studies have shown decreased activity in reward areas when anticipated rewards are taken away.
It's like our brains get used to a certain reward baseline, and when it drops, our motivation takes a nosedive.
Exactly. It might be an adaptive mechanism, our brains constantly calibrating to recent reward levels. There's even some evidence that our brains might process the removal of a reward similarly to experiencing a loss, activating areas like the insula.
So unexpected rewards tend not to undermine motivation. They're all exciting and novel. But when we're used to getting a certain reward and it vanishes, that can really mess with our drive.
Makes you think about how managing expectations around rewards is just as crucial as the rewards themselves.
Definitely. Now let's talk about choice. Psychology emphasizes how important having choices is for feeling autonomous and boosting our motivation. What's the brain's take on this?
Neuroscience sees making choices as a process of evaluating different options, and a lot of this happens in the ventral striatum. Interestingly, even just the anticipation of having a choice can activate those reward circuits. But there's a catch. If the choices are ambiguous or uncertain, it can actually lower the perceived value of those choices in our brains. We seem to prefer clear, well-defined options.
Makes sense. Too many vague options can feel more overwhelming than empowering.
Exactly. And the prefrontal cortex seems to be key for how self-determined choices boost our motivation and performance.
So the message is, offer choices, but make them meaningful and clear. Now, what about the different types of rewards out there? Tangible versus social, praise versus money, performance-based versus completion-based. Does the brain distinguish between them?
Neuroscience is finding evidence for a common neural currency for various rewards. Whether it's cash, positive feedback, or a social pat on the back, they can all activate similar parts of the brain's reward system. But the delivery of those rewards definitely matter.
Like how often they're given, how they're presented, all that jazz.
Yeah. Exactly. Intermittent rewards given at unpredictable times seem to be super effective at keeping motivation levels high. And as we talked about before, actively earned rewards light up those brain circuits way more than rewards just handed to us.
So it's all about that sense of agency, of having a hand in earning that reward.
Exactly. And this aligns with what psychology has found about performance contingent rewards and those that foster creativity being particularly effective.
It's like the brain really values effort and that I did it feeling.
Yeah.
And one last piece of the puzzle. Neuroscience is showing us that there are individual differences in how we all process those rewards.
It's not one size fits all.
Not at all. Our personality, our experiences, how much we crave novelty, even our working memory capacity, all those things can influence how our brains respond to different incentives.
It means what motivates one person might completely fall flat for someone else.
Makes sense. So wrapping it all up, what are the key takeaways from this deep dive into the world of rewards, from both the psychological and the neuroscientific perspective?
I think the biggest takeaway is that rewards are complicated. Their effects are not straightforward. It's not just about offering a reward or not, but about how that reward is perceived by the individual, how it's processed in their brain, how it fits into the context of their experiences and their goals.
And it sounds like actively engaging with tasks and feeling like we've earned a reward is a crucial ingredient for keeping that motivational fire burning, at least according to what neuroscience is telling us.
That's a key insight backed by brain science. That sense of agency, the direct link between our actions and the outcome, seems to really make a difference in how our reward circuitry responds.
So as our listeners go about their day thinking about what motivates them in their work, their learning, their personal lives, what's the big thing to keep in mind about rewards?
I'd say pay attention to the context. Is the motivation already there intrinsically? How are those rewards structured and given? Unexpected positive reinforcement can be powerful, but removing expected rewards can have the opposite effect. And remember, that sense of accomplishment, of truly earning something, seems to have a particularly strong impact on our brains.
It leaves me with this final thought for you, our amazing listener. Given how subjective our brains are when it comes to rewards, how much they light up when we feel like we've earned something through effort, maybe we need to rethink our traditional approaches to motivation. Not just in classrooms, but in workplaces, in our personal goals, everywhere. What if the fear of losing our autonomy isn't the only reason some rewards backfire? What if it's the absence of that feeling of agency, of knowing we played a part in achieving something meaningful? That makes all the difference. Something to ponder, isn't it? Thanks for diving deep with us.